This is the unrestricted free agent.
We're just going to go out there and kill him.
Wow.
Welcome into the program. Glad you're here.
And I just pulled my microphone completely off the table.
Oh,
I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do. Not what we've seen so far. They haven't closed the gap.
Defense, I'm going to tell you right now, they're nasty. They're going to be nasty all year. You know, I want to repent and apologize. I haven't really seen that.
When you see black and white and you're calling it purple, I got problems with that.
And they'll see, I told you, it's all about the deer talk.
How about that for a start? Friday morning, October 7th, 2022. That's my big intro. I just say the date. Wow, very profound. Very profound here to start. Unrestricted free agent. How you feeling on a Friday morning? Been a weird week. I mentioned it to start yesterday. Hope we're coming through loud and clear, by the way. Weird week. Weird time. Right smack in the middle of college football. From the Gamecock perspective, right smack in the middle of Shane Beamer year number 2. Carolina, Kentucky this week has been weird itself. It started weird because Carolina got a couple extra days moving things up because of Hurricane Ian coming through with that South Carolina State game. And then just, 2 days ago, the reports out of Kentucky that Will Levis might not play in this thing, the Kentucky quarterback. Last night, Mark Stoops continues weirdness. So uncomfortable. The old coach media nerd interaction, hey, you guys want me to tell the other team the whole game plan? I can't believe you're asking these very logical and reasonable, impactful questions of the head coach of a program, the guy who should have the answers. I can't answer those. The only time I comment on injuries is if someone is out, and no one is out. That was what I got out of Mark Stoops last night. Which tells you next to nothing, right? Okay, so he's going to play, but might be 25%. I think Kentucky would play with a 25% Will Levis, by the way, from what I'm gathering. When your backup quarterback has not attempted a pass in college, has taken one snap that was basically a kneel down. In Kentucky, man, to hear Kentucky people talk about Will Levis is kind of crazy. Have you guys heard this? Josh Allen is the comp. He is Josh Allen in Kentucky. It's crazy to me. I'm not telling you that Will Levis is a terrible quarterback, but to get comparisons to Josh Allen's one of the best 5 football players on the planet right now, isn't he? And he was a unicorn at Wyoming. Like that arm strength, you don't get drafted as high as Josh Allen got drafted if you're not an absolute just phenom of a prospect, right? Just don't. At Kentucky has had quarterbacks before, man. Tim Couch, that happened. Jared Lorenzen played in the league for forever. Andre Woodson, you guys remember that guy? Had him in, the top 5, certainly in the top 10 back in the day. They've had quarterbacks. I mean, Will Levis had to transfer out of Penn State to go play. So it's weird to me. Weird. The scope, the spectrum of evaluations on Will Levis. But I don't know what he's going to be, right? I do know what he is. I know he's a good college quarterback, but one that couldn't win at Ole Miss last week. One that apparently has some sort of mysterious injury that could impact, it seems like it will impact Saturday's game to some degree. To what degree? I don't know. Other than 5 points in Vegas. It's had about a 5-point impact on the line in Vegas. Crazy week, man. Weird. Roger, good morning. Appreciate your sunny outlook as always. Anthony N with a good morning UFAs. DC, appreciate the feedback. Oh, good for Teddy D. Look at that. Happy 22nd anniversary to my wife Ellen. Teddy D says, fact, we beat Kentucky 22 years ago today in Lexington, right after the wife and I tied the knot at Shandon Presbyterian Church. Go Gamecocks. Okay, a couple of things there. First of all, first impression, I'm not going to lie, Teddy D. I'm a little disappointed. Wedding during football season, yet I give you a bit of the benefit of the doubt. Away week, an away game in Lexington. Clearly it brought Carolina some good fortune, or it helped. But we all know 22 years ago, in the year 2000, coming off of the 21-game losing streak, I was going to say the programs were at different places, but Kentucky still might have been favored in that game, right? Especially on the road. But Carolina had already beaten Georgia that year, so maybe not. But man, 22 years later, I know, Teddy D, it might not be the most important thing in your life, but could you imagine 22 years ago that Carolina would have lost 7 out of 8 to Kentucky, even at that point where the Gamecocks were just getting over a 21-game losing streak? I don't think so. I don't think that would have been. I don't think that was in the toast. Let's put it that way, in the forecast at all. It's crazy, man. Congratulations to you guys. Teddy D, big fan. They got little TD3 running around, about to set the golf world, or already setting the golf world on fire. Gamecocks injury update from Shane Beamer's radio program last night. A little bit more detailed than Mark Stoops, but not a ton, right? So, the good news is Dylan Wanham on the offensive line, Darius Rush in the defensive secondary, David Spalding in the defensive secondary. All back from injury, will play. Seems like Wanham and Rush might be at a better place health-wise than Spalding. Just trying to read between the lines, but Beamer was also a little ambiguous. Is that the word? A little unclear, just saying that several players, a few other guys, questionable going into the game with typical Game 6 type stuff with bumps and bruises and being in the middle of the season and the whole deal. So what that means on Saturday, what that means tomorrow night, I don't know exactly. But it seems that Carolina is in a better spot injury-wise than Kentucky. I think that's a fair thing to say. And having had 2 extra days to prepare has to play into that. Having played at home last week instead of on the road like Kentucky, just has to have, I think, this Carolina football team feeling as prepared as possible for this game. And I'm sure they have a much clearer idea of who they will face at quarterback and how they plan on attacking that Kentucky offense, whether it's led by Will Levis or it's led by a backup quarterback who hasn't attempted a pass in college. Strange week. And then from the Gamecock fan perspective, from you guys' perspective, if you watch that Kentucky Ole Miss game on Saturday, after having watched Carolina play 5 games this year, I don't think you can come away with anything other than, this is going to be very difficult. Kentucky could have very easily won the game at Ole Miss. And what do we think of Ole Miss? Lane Kiffin, a good coach. Ole Miss, solid SEC West program right now, somewhere in the middle, I think. Isn't that fair? Not the cluster that's going on at Auburn. I think in better shape than LSU. They're certainly ranked higher. More stability from a coaching standpoint, obviously, or a roster standpoint. More of an identity. But not the greatest talent top to bottom. Not championship level, elite level, anywhere close to Alabama. I think pretty similar to Arkansas, don't you think? Carolina's already done that. They didn't have a chance to win that game in Arkansas. They got back in the game, didn't play well enough to win it. Kentucky definitely played well enough to win the game, just turned it over late. Penalty went against them, didn't work out. Look at the numbers going into this game, and Kentucky hasn't played that well offensively through 5 games, but the big asterisk on that is not having their star tailback, Chris Rodriguez, for 4 of them. He comes back against Ole Miss, doesn't light the world on fire by any stretch of the imagination, but Kentucky improved for sure. And now, I was listening again. Matt Jones is the Kentucky Sports Network, I think that's what they call it. Guy that I've noticed in the last several years. He just seems to be a guy who is notable, let's put it that way. Has made comments, just seems to be that kind of guy, let's put it that way. Newsworthy-ish kind of guy, or I don't know Matt, and he seems like a nice guy, but he's made comments in the past that he's got strong opinions, let's put it that way. Certainly rubbed South Carolina fans, I think, the wrong way. He's not afraid to put out a strong opinion. He's the one that put out the original tweet, I think, about Will Levis. Let's pop that up real quick. So if you guys don't know who I'm talking about exactly, you can go check him out on Twitter there at KY Sports Radio. Kentucky Sports Radio is where Matt Jones is. About a lot of speculations, but here's what's real. I love that when somebody tries to get real, he gets real ambiguous. Will Levis is questionable. He has an injury different than the finger that isn't long-term serious, but could leave him out. Game time decision. It's so weird. That's so weird, isn't it? Let me tell you what's real. I'm going to be as vague as possible. But he was on with Greg McElroy, Cole Kubelik in Birmingham yesterday, I believe. Yeah, day after this tweet popped out, right? And talking about Kentucky, talking about the 3 wide receivers for Kentucky this year, saying they're 3 of the best receivers Kentucky has had in his lifetime, which is basically his lifetime of covering Kentucky football. Been a long, long time. And really interesting to hear that, just because they're home run threats, and he feels like they have players. Those players specifically are an example of how Kentucky football is at a place where they just never been before. From an athletic standpoint, just a talent standpoint, I think. Will be fascinating to see how that translates tomorrow night. Because no one would argue South Carolina is anywhere close to that, right? Got some good players. But talent level top to bottom. But Rick Sanford was really clear about that when we spoke earlier this week. The first round draft pick from the University of South Carolina, saying that 1 through 22, Carolina's there. They can compete with pretty much anybody. And it's just after that where you don't have the influx of talent and depth that a lot of other SEC programs, and especially the elite ones, have. And that has always been a thing at South Carolina, right? To me, that was what Steve Spurrier was able to do, certainly for an extended 5-year period. Not only did he get difference makers that we typically talk about and give most of the credit to, Alshon Jeffrey, Stephon Gilmore. Did you guys see him last night? Made a pick in the end zone that helped the Colts end up kicking a field goal to get the lead, 12-9. Let me put up this tremendous banner, by the way. And then was the defender on the I don't understand the 4th down or the last play of the game, going for it for Denver, down a field goal at about the 5-yard line. Would have been a chip shot field goal to send it in overtime at home. They decide to go for it. I mean, I like aggressive, but when no one has scored a touchdown in the game, when Russell Wilson and that offense has looked as uncomfortable ineffective as they have, and you say, no, we got one play to go win it. Let's roll the dice. It didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. In Russell, we trust. And then, oof. But Stephon Gilmore was defending on the last pass as well. So, sorry, got off the tangent there. The guys like Gilmore, Alshon Jeffrey, Jadeveon Clowney, Melvin Ingram, go down the list. Marcus Lattimore, Stephen Garcia, Connor Shaw, Bruce Ellington, Ace Sanders. Who else we throwing in there? A host of others, right? They get the credit, but it was also some depth behind them, right? So to hear that they're talking in that way at Kentucky, very interesting. All right, we're going up to the Blue Ridge Mountains where the Tonesters weighing in this morning. Craig, good morning to you, sir. Chris has made the adjustment, I see, to the YouTube instead of the Facebook. Morning, Tim, fellow Gamecocks, and our resident Tater. Oh, there's Troy. Very cordial this morning. Craig says, they are good. They aren't Randall Cobb, but they're very good receivers. Cobb was tremendous in college, no doubt about it. Wan'Dale Robinson last year, absolutely fantastic. And now what I heard from Matt Jones yesterday is that he's putting these other three right there with them, with at least one freshman in that group, right? The freshman that Shane Beamer was talking about at his weekly press conference, whose mom injured her foot last year when Kentucky stormed the field after beating Florida, I think it was. And he got word of that. It's like, note to self, when you get word of a parent of a recruit injuring herself, storming the field for another team, you're probably not going to get that recruit. Turned out to be true. Dane Key, I think his name is, the wide receiver. Yeah. Troy, this is another thing. This is fascinating to me, too. The conversation around that game last night, not just that game, but around games that aren't going in the museum of football history as ideal matchups or great games. Last night, man, was something. You guys missed that. I mean, because, Troy, think about who you're talking about for a second. Both quarterbacks. Russell Wilson has won a Super Bowl. Matt Ryan should have won a Super Bowl if you talk to Falcons fans, up 28-3 on the Patriots back in the day. A little bit older in their careers now, for sure. Not quite the same guys, but still, I mean, tremendous resumes. And, yeah, it was ugly. It was ugly last night for sure. Yeah, Craig. Dane Key, a dude. He says, wish we got him. Troy, echoing all the social media chatter. It was brutal. I mean, why don't we ever give defenses credit? Is that a thing? Or do we just see like missed passes and we assume that was just quarterbacks not being good? I mean, Tom Brady did come out the other day and say, I see a lot of bad football. And I'm sure you probably saw the news of Brady and his family life and all that. Would prefer not to discuss that too much. It's just too bad. I always think about kids in that kind of situation where it doesn't work out between parents, or that's how it appears here. Just too bad for sure. But yeah, the game last night, not easy to watch if you're looking for a bunch of points and beautiful offensive football. Again, I want to play that again. I don't think we talked about that enough, or I still don't know if I have clarity on this thing. What Marcus Satterfield, the Gamecock offensive coordinator, said in his press conference the other day, when evaluating Kentucky, I find fascinating. And again, haven't heard anything like that in all my years of covering football. And I need some help from you guys to maybe understand or just fill out exactly what he's saying here.
I love watching those guys play on offense and defense. They've recruited. Coach Stoops and his staff have done an unbelievable job of recruiting. You can tell they've recruited to a body type, especially on defense. Their length, athleticism, toughness, football IQ, you can tell. Very, very smart guys, football guys. I think that, they've done a tremendous job. It's just such a tough defense, and they're where they're supposed to be. I know they got out of some gaps with some tempo stuff last week against Ole Miss, but that's a rarity. You go back for years, and I mean, they're where they're supposed to be in coverage and fitting the runs, and it's just it's beautiful. If you're a football purist, it's beautiful to watch.
Football purist, beautiful to watch. Is that how? I mean, did you have to be a I don't know if you, even if you are a football purist, if you thought last night was beautiful by any stretch of the imagination. Again, when I talked about it yesterday, I was like, well, maybe it's like the Satterfield sees football as kind of like a chessboard, as opposed to the rest of us are kind of looking at checkers and the pieces are all sliding together in conjunction. One side makes a move, other side counters. That's the only way that I can explain that. If you guys hear it differently or understand it differently, please let me know. But maybe that's what last night was to the very few out there who would consider themselves football purists, which I really don't even know what that is. Baseball, I got it, right? That's always been a baseball thing. You don't believe in the DH. You really appreciate a good sacrifice bunt or a guy hitting to the right side of the infield with a man on second and less than 2 outs, getting him over, like stuff like that, right? That a lot of casual fans would either don't even recognize or don't care about a bit. And then a lot of newfounded analytics guys would say, no, that's completely overhyped. The numbers tell a different story. But that's what I've always thought to be a baseball purist type mindset, right? And also, all these baseball writer nerds. No, I'm not allowing you in the Hall of Fame. I'm not putting you on my ballot the first time just because I have that power. It's so dumb. It at least has softened, I think, through the years. But a football purist, because football is such a game that a quickly evolving game. I've never heard it put that way. Oh, good morning to you, ma'am. Great to see you. Yeah, Anthony, it did kind of it kind of sounded like that, didn't it? Like, I get you got to have the coach speak. It's very professional to say, yep, we respect the other team. They're really well coached, and praise the other opponent, right? Then Lou Holtz would always go the extra mile and got the reputation for poor mouthing his own team and really building up the other team. And eventually nobody bought that routine, or it was like almost like a nod and a wink kind of thing. But what Marcus Satterfield say? I mean, that was as high praise as you can get in a lot of ways. And almost like, as I was hearing that, I'm almost concerned for the way that he's trying to develop a game plan against it, because it almost sounds like he is putting them in such high esteem that feels like there's very little he can do. And that's just an interesting spot to be in. He recruited football guys is my favorite part. Clearly to a certain body type. Like, doesn't everybody in the SEC recruit to a certain body type? Like, really athletic, really, really strong and fast. Yep, Troy, all started with Moneyball back in the day. But the baseball purist had been out there way before Moneyball, right? Football purist, I just don't know what that is. Like, I guess I'm assuming that would be you appreciate a good 4-yard gain maybe more than the casual fan. I don't know what that was. Last night, if you're, I think maybe you had to be a football purist to enjoy that Colts game, the Colts-Broncos. Oh, maybe it's a good pitching duel as well. Like, baseball purists typically like those, or they've had the reputation to be able to appreciate those a lot more than the casual fan. So I didn't hear it or see anybody on social media raising their hand, say, "Hey guys, you're missing it. This is great football. This is why you're missing it. This is football purist." And then I don't think you want your college football offensive coordinator right now to consider himself a purist, do you? Because when I hear purists, I think old-fashioned, stuck in an outdated way of thinking in a lot of ways, unable to adjust. And that's probably overly hyped in the whole thing. I'm not saying that's completely what we've seen from a Marcus Satterfield-led offense, but we haven't seen the opposite end of that spectrum for sure. Or if we have seen some attempts at being creative and different formations and the whole deal. We haven't seen success consistently off of anything that might be outside the realm or outside the box a little bit. Craig says, just seems too smart for the room, and with 20 hours a week, college football players need it dumbed down. Doesn't have to be chess, it's football. I hear what you're saying, Craig. Again, I know that we do that kind of reverse engineering thing in all of sports, but especially with college football, that we take what's happening, the results, and then we try to tell the story around that, right? As opposed to actually knowing what's going on, seeing the results, and marrying the two. We don't know. And it's never completely fair for sure from the outside. Troy says, I don't mind a good defensive struggle, but not like last night's game. I think that's very fair. And then also, anytime, and maybe this is a 2022 thing more uniquely than elsewhere. I was listening to Josh Pate talk about the current environment and how, speaking of analytics and Moneyball and the whole thing, how people in college sports especially are in power, are in places of power without the sports background, the coaching background more than ever, right? You have financial guys, marketing guys, legal guys, kind of spread out throughout the country, sprinkled around in positions of power, and ultimately they're going to make hires. And you've seen, especially in college football already this year, early moves where head coaches gone, right? And also the salaries are way up there. So the patience is that much shorter, smaller, thinner, however you want to put that. But where you're saying there, Craig, how I got on this little tangent is it's always about the production, right? And I guess maybe this also comes with that bowl game last year, how Carolina looked. That offense looked unlike Carolina offense we saw all year long. So was it the extra preparation time that allowed that to happen? It's hard to come to a different conclusion than that, right? And what Craig's saying, like during a week, you got the NCAA limitations of how much you can be around your players or how much practice time they can have and the whole thing. Chris says, I don't think that was a defensive struggle last night, LOL. That was an offensive struggle. I think you just say that was a struggle in general. But that's where we are in 2022. I meant to get to that, where you see Denver's own fans booing consistently their own team. I think it's in the post-COVID world, maybe, or I mean, the impact of people being locked in the house basically for a long time that is a thing, right? But then you just gave up so much to get this quarterback. And then you're seeing some struggles, and I get the frustration, man. I think last night at one point, Al Michaels doing the game on Amazon with Kirk Herbstreit, which is a sentence I never thought I would say, by the way. But it's like, sometimes a game can be so bad that it actually is good. What do you think about that? You agree with that, Kirk? Is basically what he said. You know what I mean, Kirk? He's like, no. I laughed out loud hearing that. Chris says, when your fans are leaving at the end of the fourth quarter and not staying for bonus football. Yeah, it goes into overtime. So I guess that's how it worked, right? I think I mistold that story. It did go into overtime, and they just didn't settle for the tie at the end. Because I thought if ever a game should end with both teams feeling bad, both teams feeling a little less than, not having that winning feeling, last night was that. So I thought it was just going to be perfect karma in a lot of ways, perfect symmetry for the game, synergy. Maybe synergy is the right word. That thing would have ended in a tie. Oh, Troy. What made it worse is I had Denver minus 3.5. Ooh, sorry to hear that. Eric B., good to hear from you, sir. Had to turn it off halftime. It was so boring. But think about it, like just a few years ago, or maybe not even that long, right? When the idea that we weren't going to have football, or we're so thankful just to have it, and fans couldn't even be at the games. But man, at least we had it, right? Now, how quickly we forget. Oh, yuck. The NFL should be ashamed of itself. Was basically the sentiment I got from social media last night. So all of this comes off of, really, those stories always get kind of told, and you already know the ending, reverse engineered, like how you got there. So right now, the story for Gamecock football is that the offense hasn't worked how it needs to work. So why is the question, or who shoulders the brunt of that burden and blame? It's the offensive coordinator for sure. And even when we hear from Shane Beamer and Marcus Satterfield and say, oh, they're close, they're going to get better at doing this, that will lead to that. I think Gamecock fans are just like, yeah, I don't know. I ain't buying it. Got to see it. And then even after seeing it to some degree against Charlotte and South Carolina State with 50-point-plus performances, I'll believe it when I see it against SEC opponents. And then I feel like some of you out there, even if Carolina's offense looks streamlined this week against a program that has a reputation for being a very good defense, will say, that was one game. I'll believe it when I see it again. It's crazy. But I understand where you guys are coming from. I don't necessarily disagree, by the way. But just hearing Marcus Satterfield talk about Kentucky, man. I mean, you would never, ever imagine. I always default to the Steve Spurrier. Like, how would he be talking about this game? First of all, 7 out of 8 against Kentucky. I know some of those were on Spurrier's watch, right? Was that 2014 and 15, even though he wasn't coaching the 15 game, I believe. But those were seasons that he started as the Carolina head coach. So the first 2 games of this losing streak on his resume after having one of the longest streaks in college football history, I think, win streaks against Kentucky, is where Steve Spurrier was back in the day. So it has changed a lot, hasn't it? All right. So along with a big weekend of college football, the NFL continues. Last night's game being what it is. We got baseball today. We got playoff baseball. We've got the postseason starting. A fantastic time of year, and it's different than it has been before. Let's break it down again. 6 teams in each league making the playoffs. Top 2 division winners getting byes. Dodgers and Braves in the National League. Yankees and Astros in the American League. Here's a look at the wild card playoffs. The Yankees set to get the winner of Rays Guardians, which will kick us off today, 12:07 on ESPN. ABC will be airing the first National League wild card series. And by the way, these are best of 3. Best of 3s. The Braves await the winner of the Phillies Cardinals. Game 1 of that series set for Tuesday, by the way. You got Mariners Blue Jays as the late afternoon game on ESPN, with the Astros waiting on that winner, that series winner. And then you got Padres Mets as the nightcap tonight, and the Dodgers will get the winner of that series. Here's a look just in case you're looking for it. They haven't released any game times. First two games of the division series, best of 5, against the winner of the Phillies and Cardinals will be in Atlanta starting Tuesday. Then Wednesday, they'll get a travel day on Thursday and continue that thing either in St. Louis or Philadelphia 1 week from today. So trying to keep that straight for you. And there is nothing quite like postseason baseball. It fits right in with the college football this time of year, just the electricity in the crowd. I love it. Jason, greetings to you, sir. Glad to have you in on the program. Chris, thanks for letting us know. Had baseball last night. Suns team won 3-1. Started at shortstop. Good to hear, sir. Guys, we have to come up with some picks today. We get to come up with some picks, some show picks, consensus show picks, right? We've been going through the matchups the last several days. I've got final lines here. I see I have to adjust Missouri, Florida as I look at my little graphics here because they're not a top 25 game. I didn't do that pre-show. My bad. Let's go check that line. Make sure you get the latest. 6.5 is where we're going with Carolina and Kentucky, where we're seeing that as the latest line after a kind of crazy week with the Will Levis injury news. Okay, that line for Florida, still 11, so we're going to make that 11.5 against Missouri if we pick that thing. I'll go through them real quick right now just to get them back into your mind and see if we need to have some serious discussions on any particular games. But yeah, let me do that, and then I'll get to Craig's comment because that is going to be a fun one. Troy, quick baseball comment. How about the Mets keeping DeGrom out of the series with San Diego unless they face an elimination game? Interesting strategy. And that's the thing, because of this kind of new format, how important it was, or it seems to be able to get one of those buys like the Braves did. And now the Mets have to deal with the wild card series, assuming they can get through that, and then to the division series. What you do with your pitching, this is where managers make their money, right? This is where organizations either get behind their manager or say, hey man, we gotta find somebody else. That didn't work out at all. Chris, I'm guessing you're kidding about let's get out of that slump. LOL for our picks. 3-2 the last 2 weeks, and Chris said we're in a slump the other day. So I think that was the reference there. Okay, quick rundown of the college football Saturday schedule, which I feel like is fantastic, especially the way it starts in the SEC. Tennessee at LSU, and LSU at home, ranked an underdog. You don't hear that often, and then especially against Tennessee, right? That just has not happened. I think the last time they played this game like this was 12 years ago anyway. And Tennessee ended up winning it, I think, with the goal line stand back in the day. But great way to start. I mean, LSU being the cluster that it is in so many ways. It came against Auburn last week, a good example of it. They can be pretty good and they can be pretty bad. Tennessee's offense, tremendous. Can they continue to do it at LSU? Can they get a big SEC road win? And to me, would be a bit of a stamp of legitimacy. I understand the Florida win was a big win, something that hadn't happened very often for Tennessee. But no one's claiming that Florida is one of the best teams in the country right now. They're just not. LSU is not one of the best teams in the country either. But Tennessee, if it's going to continue to be ranked amongst the best teams in the country at the number 8 this week, you got to go to someone else's house a pretty good team and beat them. I mean, the fact they're only favored by 3.5 kind of tells me that Vegas is still waiting to see Tennessee become fully legit. They're not there with this line, and I think it's fair, especially based off of what they've been in the last dozen years or so. So that leads us off. Missouri at Florida, also at noon. Loser of this one going to be feeling real bad. Missouri having played so well against Georgia, coming up short last week. Florida needing a win and at home. And that fan base will not tolerate a loss to Missouri. But I mentioned it last week going into Missouri and Georgia, even though I think Georgia has won a bunch of those games in a row, I always thought that game has turned out to be closer than I thought it would be, a better matchup for Missouri than a lot of other teams against Georgia, and I feel like this is the same. In a lot of ways, I think Missouri has had Florida's number in this series. So we'll see what happens in the Swamp Saturday at noon, adding to another great game. 3 really good SEC games, in my opinion. Mississippi State, 9.5-point favorites. That line has gone up because the status of KJ Jefferson very much in doubt. I'll double check that. This almost makes me think that maybe he was ruled out. I think we would have seen a headline on that one. Questionable last I heard. Just want to make sure. Yeah, back in practice on Wednesday. So if he plays, will not be 100% is kind of how I'm reading this. And we all understand how important KJ Jefferson is to Arkansas. Mississippi State coming off feeling very good about itself with a win against Texas A&M. I mentioned it yesterday or earlier in the week how it seems to feel like, to me, a game that Mike Leach has been in before, and his teams have disappointed pretty consistently. Something to think about. But in Stark Vegas, game days in Kansas. Another sentence that my brain wanted to stop me on. 6.5-point underdogs at home to TCU. Man, I really want to say, hey, I want Kansas and the points, the game day energy, their quarterback able to run it and throw it and be very productive, and Lance Leipold and the whole thing. And yet, do I really want to put my confidence in Kansas football yet? I know they're undefeated. I know it's a great year, great story. I feel like I'm attached to the story more than the actual football. 3:30 games. Not the best slate when you look at 29.5 in the SEC game of the week. It's what Georgia's favored by. This is more like, all right, how's Auburn looking here? How's Brian Harsin look on the sideline? And will this be his last game kind of thing? I think that's really the only intrigue, other than, is Georgia going to be as mad as we all think they are and come back and give Auburn the whooping that we think they will? Same exact spread, really, for this game as it was last week against Mizzou. Out on the West Coast, UCLA Utah. UCLA ranked 18th, home dogs, plus 3.5 to the Utes. And Utah seems to have gotten over that first loss to Florida pretty good and played pretty well. But I don't know how I feel about that one. I don't watch those teams play enough to have a strong feeling one way or the other. I do feel pretty strongly that Ole Miss will probably cover this pretty easily. Yet they're coming off of a bit of a battle for sure. Now going on the road, will Vanderbilt have their full attention? I don't have a ton of confidence in Lane Kiffin being able to make sure that happens. We'll see. Night games, just a smorgasbord, right? Especially for those of us in South Carolina with Clemson at Boston College. That spread being what it is, pretty massive. Boston College getting a big win last week against Louisville, and yet they haven't been good this year. Carolina, Kentucky down to 6.5, going on at the exact same time as Clemson and Boston College. BYU, Notre Dame. Notre Dame favored, even though they're unranked, against the 16th team in the country. Texas A&M, Bama. Remember how much we talked about this thing in the offseason? Jimbo, now almost irrelevant in college football after the loss to Mississippi State last week. Not totally irrelevant, but Texas A&M irrelevant when it comes to any kind of championship discussion. And they certainly didn't think they would be there. Their fan base on October 8th that we all kind of circled before the season started because of the Jimbo Saban beef. Also, the Carolina Kentucky thing with Mark Stoops mentioning sunglasses. Florida State, NC State, another really fun game, I think, in a lot of ways, on paper for sure, with both teams coming off losses, both teams having been really, really excited going into their games last week, both fan bases being deflated. Now one will be really, really bummed, the loser of that game. We got a more cowbell from Josh. Craig says, I don't feel good about any of these games this week. App State broke A&M. Bama W from BW. A lot of points in the LSU-Tennessee game. Tennessee covers. What does everybody else think? And he's going best bet is Michigan giving 22 points. I don't even know. I think one of you guys suggested Michigan-Iowa last week, and I screwed that up and forgot about it. And it was a great suggestion. Let's see what Michigan's got going this week. They've been really quiet, haven't they? Nationally.
28 years old, and I don't
Maybe
care.
I'm hyping
Still
that
on
up.
Mickey Mouse anytime.
Sorry about that. Michigan's at Indiana, but given 22.5 points. Eesh. Indiana's 3-2. They've got a Big Ten win on the ledger. Who do they have that against? Because you can have some Big Ten wins this year and not impress me at all. Great. You beat Nebraska, Northwestern. Who'd you beat, Indiana? Nebraska by 14. Lost by 21 at Cincinnati earlier this year. Did beat Illinois. Sorry, they didn't even beat Nebraska, right? Nebraska just beat them by 14. Sorry, my fault on that one. Beat Illinois to start the season, which looks like a much better win right now than it probably appeared even to Indiana then. 22.5 is just too much. I think if it was 20.5, maybe I'm with you. That feels like a 3-touchdown win. We got to go blue from Paul. Good to hear from you, Paul. Yeah, so the win there, not really much in doubt for Michigan because Indiana is not what it was just 2 years ago, especially with Michael Penix. That line, though, interesting. We'll keep an eye on it. All right, let's go to Craig's comment here. And this has really been the bulk of our discussion this week. What does Carolina, Kentucky mean on Saturday night? Tomorrow night, South Carolina, Kentucky. Well, the context of just that question has changed because what Kentucky team are you going to get? Will Levis going to try it out there? If he does play and he's not 100%, how much can Carolina take advantage of him not being 100%? How much does that change what has already been unexplosive offense, I think? Well, the passing game has been pretty explosive. An underwhelming offense, I think, is what Kentucky fans would say. The headline I read you guys from the Louisville Courier-Journal earlier this week was Kentucky's offense is not good or something to that effect. I think this, Craig says, is the most important game of the Shane Beamer era. You have to finally get a road win. You have to finally beat Kentucky. This group has been together 18 games now. It's time. Craig is certainly not the only Gamecock fan to feel this way. I think you guys, again, I told you yesterday, I'm not trying to get back on my soapbox. But let's think about this rationally, Craig. Kentucky was the number 7 team in the country last week. We're a penalty and a fumble away from winning on the road at Ole Miss. Just got their big-time running back for the first time. Carolina last won at Kentucky in 2012. This Gamecock football team, through 5 games, I think it's very fair to say, has been underwhelming, a lot like that Kentucky run offense especially has been. It has not, we have not seen a noticeable step forward in this program from year one to year two. I think that's very fair, right? I thought they were maybe on that trajectory after the Arkansas game. They got down 21-3. They made it 21-16. They were right there to win it. Spencer Rattler throws for a big chunk of yards. You kind of stayed in the game. Certainly better on the road than other performances we've seen. But then you turned around and you let Georgia manhandle you. You got destroyed at home, embarrassingly so. And now it's just been 2 get-right games where you've done what you had to do against Charlotte and South Carolina State. So it's time, because they played 18 games, and a lot of those guys haven't been together 18 games. Spencer Rattler certainly hadn't been at Carolina for 18 games. This is game 6 for him. Juice Wells, Corey Rucker, Austin Stogner, pretty important pieces on that offense. And Craig, I think you have to take last year, and to me, it was so successful last year. I understand it probably raised your expectation level for year 2, but I think you're being unreasonable here. I think in my mind, last year earned Shane Beamer that much more leash this year. Carolina had only won 4 games last year. There's no way, Craig, you would be saying this. No Gamecock fan would. It wouldn't make any sense at all. I mean, this one doesn't make that much sense either, but I understand how you got here, I guess, based off of 7 wins last year, and you're saying, well, you want to have the program continuing to move forward. The problem is that last year's team overachieved. It was not a 7-win team from a talent roster standpoint, right? Rick Sanford still says, I don't know how they won 7 games without a quarterback. This year, you got a quarterback, right? But we haven't seen improvement in the offense. Maybe slightly. Okay, we'll give them a little bit, right? We haven't seen enough to think that Carolina can go on the road. I haven't seen enough. Craig, maybe you have. But if you have, please tell me where it is. Where have you seen enough improvement to say, yep, absolutely, confidence in Spencer Rattler and company going on the road and making enough plays offensively, and then that defense making enough plays to beat a good football team. Kentucky's good. Kentucky is not. I think that's the problem Carolina fans can't wrap their minds around. This is not what Kentucky has been. Kentucky is a lot more like, I think, who should I compare them to? I think Auburn, maybe? I think they're a lot more like the Auburn program used to be. I don't know. Auburn is so up and down, right? And it's probably a terrible example. What's a good SEC comparison? I don't know. That they might be more like South Carolina was. That might be the best. I think that's the most fair comparison. I think what South Carolina was in those really good days, let's say from 2008 to 2014, it kind of is what Kentucky is now. Kentucky's got a lot of dudes in the NFL. They do it from the defense first standpoint. They got a quarterback now that can make an argument that he's amongst the best quarterbacks that they've had in recent memory. Tim Couch kind of excluded, right? They got a run game you got to respect. They got some weapons on the outside. That sounds a lot to me like what South Carolina was back then. And South Carolina, unfortunately, is a lot closer to what Kentucky was then than what the program used to be. Craig says, if we go up there and kick a field goal and they beat us, so be it. And they kick a field goal, he's saying. But This looking unprepared and falling behind 17-3 early has got to stop. Look competent, play physical, look well coached. I understand that's what you want. How much confidence do you have that that's what's going to happen? There's a reason why you're fed up with that, and I get it. But what are the odds of that trend changing tomorrow night? To me, they don't. And Adam, I understand what you're saying too. If we don't win this game, I don't see us making a bowl game. Right now, the home game against Texas A&M seems a lot more winnable than this one, doesn't it? And maybe Will Levis's status has a lot to do with that. But I think that's the only rational way to look at this thing. If you can remove your perception of the logo on the helmet. I get it. Carolina's never beat Texas A&M. Carolina always used to beat Kentucky. So I think that's why Gamecock fans see it a little warped right now. It's a warped perception based on pre-2022 production in college football, I think. And for Kentucky, it's like pre-2014, I think. Jason says, talk about more scar tissue. If this game is close and Levis comes in the game, Kirk Gibson style, and wins the game, that would be consistent with South Carolina history. LOL. Jason, I don't think that's ever happened, has it? I mean, I feel like what you're talking about is what Connor Shaw did at Missouri. Was that 2012? That's almost exactly what he did. I can't remember a single instance in Gamecock football history where that's happened against Carolina. An injured quarterback has hobbled onto the field and made a play and gets to get the old run off the field with the fist pump. And then Jason says, note, I'm actually feeling more optimistic than my previous take. Good for you. Josh says, what surprised me is finding out that we're just 1-7 against Kentucky in our last 8 meetings. We need to improve that. I don't get that, Josh. I have zero confidence, DC says, in beating Kentucky on the road, even with their quarterback out. Now, see, that's the other end of the spectrum, right? I feel like you guys I've heard from, maybe just hearing the extreme, right? Must win. Most important game in the Shane Beamer era. No confidence this team can win. Like, where is the middle of the road here? Like, important game would be a huge win. No doubt about it. There are reasons to be confident. Got a couple extra days to prepare. Kentucky's quarterback status really kind of up in the air, and they don't have a backup quarterback with any kind of college football experience. Like, those are really good things in your favor. Kentucky's run game has been putrid so far this season. Excellent sign for a Gamecock defense that has proven it is not the strongest against the run. Chris Rodriguez, while he's been pretty good in his career, he hadn't exactly been a Carolina killer. They scored 16 points last year against the Gamecocks. There are reasons to have some confidence going into this game, or at least to have some optimism. Marshawn Lloyd needs to get at least 20 touches this game. You guys know he's tied for the lead in the country, I think, with 6 touchdowns this season. Marshawn Lloyd's done some things, man. This offense has done some things. I understand. They haven't done it to the level that you had hoped with Spencer Rattler coming in. And I think that's really a big portion of this conversation we're having right now, isn't it? Didn't Spencer Rattler really raise the level of expectation from Gamecock fans? Didn't they? I mean, you hear the story of a guy that's a Heisman Trophy front runner going into last year, and he gets benched midway through the year at Oklahoma. Disappointing, no doubt. But then the conversation goes with Marcus Satterfield. Hey, people think I stink. They think you stink. We should prove everybody wrong. Like, that's a great story. And yet we have not seen synergy between those two, have we? You just haven't. It is not that. But that doesn't keep it from ever happening, right? And last year taught me that Shane Beamer and Marcus Satterfield, they can pull a couple of games that you're not expecting. It can kind of come out of nowhere. North Carolina bowl game, Florida last year. Throw Auburn in there to a smaller degree. Jason says, it's maybe never happened to South Carolina, but it just feels right, doesn't it? No, it doesn't to me, Jason. Craig says, we're just going to kill him. York, good morning to you, sir. So when I hear the most important game in a tenure for a coach, I think that a loss should be much more impactful than what I feel, what I see that this loss would be. This would just continue the trend, right? There's nothing really that has been building that shows me that a trend is going to change for the Gamecock football program. I mean, what are we basing that off of? 56 points against South Carolina State, beating Charlotte 56 to 20. Sorry, it's 50 points against South Carolina State, right? 50 to 10. I mean, not basing that off of any kind of fact or trend, really, right? South Carolina didn't break a trend against Arkansas. It got down 21-3. This team's not very good early on in games. That translates to not being able to win on the road. You don't have enough talent, playmakers, or play calling ability that we've seen so far in the Shane Beamer era to overcome any kind of sizable hole on the road. You just don't. And so, until I see that trend change, I'm not convinced that Carolina can be a good SEC team, because a good SEC team wins games on the road. I think that's fair, isn't it? So how can you get to the point where a coach had a really good first year, you're to the 6th game in year number 2, and you're saying it's the most important game of the Shane Beamer era? Doesn't make any sense to me. I think the most important game was last year's game against Florida. That changed completely the trajectory of the season, the perception of Carolina's season. You whooped up on a team that was ranked in the top 25 and supposed to beat you, and it wasn't even close. And Shane Beamer and Frank are hugging there on the field afterwards. I mean, it was a stamp of legitimacy for Shane Beamer as a head coach. He hadn't had that. There was none of that until last year. Now, this would be another stamp in a lot of ways, right? Do it against a pretty good team on the road from the Carolina fan base. Do it against Kentucky, which does mean more. There is a lot of stuff wrapped up in that. I get it. It's important, no doubt. Would be a big step. But, Craig, okay, agreed. I'm not trying to judge your feelings, sir. It doesn't have to make sense to you, Tim. It's the way I feel. Right, but I'm trying to illuminate, Craig, that I think you're too caught up in your feelings to evaluate this one objectively at all. I think your evaluation of it being the most important game is overhyped, overstated. That's all. Craig says, I bet Beamer would agree if he's being honest. I don't think coaches see it that way, right? I mean, I really do think coaches have convinced themselves the next game's the most important. Next game's most important. Well, because they bear the brunt of all the embarrassment that would come if you don't take care of what you're supposed to take care of, right? And unfortunately, Gamecock football has seen some examples of those in recent history, let's say. I mean, Shane certainly knows he could really use a win right now. His program, it would be a huge, huge boost to the Gamecock football program right now. No doubt about it. But I always go the other side, right? Well, what does the loss do? And that's why it's nowhere close to the most important game in the Shane Beamer era, in my opinion, because the loss would just continue a trend. It wouldn't be an outlier by any stretch of the imagination. It would just be what it has been. And Shane is nowhere near the place where he has to reverse all the trends in the Gamecock football program. He already did that last year. You win one more game than you won 2 seasons combined. You blew that thing out of the water. You win a bowl game. You do it against a national championship winning coach, against another program that Gamecock fans really, really like to beat. Good. Joshua would be the biggest win of the Beamer era, in my opinion. Okay, I can buy that. I think it would be about equal to what Florida was last year. Remember, that reverse engineering thing I was talking about earlier, I think we might be doing that right now. I don't know if we can undersell or oversell, I guess I should say. I don't know if we can overstate the importance of that Florida win last year and the confidence and everything it gave the program at the time. And I think it certainly helped springboard to what became a winning season, and looked at times like they had no chance to have that. At least it looked to me like that. You barely skate by and win at East Carolina. You beat Troy at home by 9. Yeah, DC, I tend to agree with you. Yeah, I absolutely agree with this. Before the season started, I said our most important game would be Missouri. It's probably going to play out that way. I think winning at Missouri this year, or excuse me, winning against Missouri is much more important for Shane Beamer, because you lose this game, your program does not slide back at all. You don't lose ground if you lose this game. Now, you could make up a ton of it would be a big jump for the program, no doubt. But that's why this doesn't make sense. I think you lose to Missouri for a second straight season in your South Carolina, you do take a step back, because Missouri, Gamecock fans, you might not want to hear this at all, or you might not want to believe it, or even if you know it and you don't want to acknowledge it, it's the truth, right? South Carolina is a lot closer to Missouri right now for that 5th or 6th spot in the SEC West than they are to Kentucky for that 2nd or 3rd spot in the East. Just reality. Not only do we lose on the road, but we get killed. So a win does change a trend. Yes, obviously a win changes a trend, but a loss doesn't. And I think that's how you got to evaluate this thing, right? The loss to Missouri would be a bad trend for a new coaching staff, right? Eli Drinkwitz is a pretty good coach, but Missouri is not considered to be a pretty good SEC program right now. If you're trying to get your program to be considered a pretty good SEC program, you got to beat Missouri when you're South Carolina. You don't have to beat Kentucky right now. It's weird. I know. It's a weird way to look at the SEC, but that's where we are in 2022. And that, I was going to say in my opinion, but that's not my opinion. Those are facts. That's what it is. So, overhyping. Gamecock fans are going to be way too upset, is what I'm gathering, if Carolina doesn't win this game. If it's not ultra close. If Kentucky covers the spread, let's put it that way. And let's go back to the original spread. Kentucky wins this game by double digits. Gamecock fans are going, from what I'm gathering with just the conversation I'm having with you guys, are going to have an overinflated sense of doom and gloom. It's not that. Kentucky does not represent that anymore. That years past, man. Those years are gone. Mark Stoops he's gotten rid of that at Kentucky. Got to give him all the credit in the world, man. He deserves that respect. You don't have to like it. You don't have to. You can certainly take exception to the comments he made at SEC Media Days about the sunglasses and the whole thing, and there is that goes into it. I absolutely think Shane Beamer and their coaching staff took that personally, even though he has said the opposite publicly. And I think that would be acknowledged if Carolina wins the football game on Saturday night. Josh says, I just hope he comes out wearing sunglasses. You mean out afterwards, maybe? You know, he's that guy. He knows. He knows how to appeal to his fan base. Chris says, do we feel good if we lose, but the offense looks amazing and it comes down to Kentucky maybe beating us with a last-second field goal? You should feel good about the program. You should feel good about the season. I think large percentage maybe of the fan base needs to feel good about this team competing on the road against a good team. Kind of waffle about whether that happened against Arkansas, right? You can make the case one way or another. In my opinion, I tend to trend positively, try to see the bright side of things. So I thought it was trending in the right direction, right? It wasn't a field goal game, though. So if that were to happen in this one, I think you have to take that out of this game. Please don't get that mistaken about to moral victories and the whole thing. And with where this program is right now, where this team is, to me, I know Shane said the opposite earlier this week. Let's see if we can get him talking about that, actually. I think I still got that. He was talking about, I think I might have deleted it here in my little system. But he was talking about kind of being a mature team, I think. No, maybe I got that. Wait a second. Let's see if it's in here, because he was asked about the physicality. To me, this is what it comes down to. It's not even close. Will Carolina match Kentucky's physicality? I see it like a street fight, basically. Especially after losing last week and knowing that their quarterback's been going through some stuff this week. I think also knowing that Kentucky feels like it owns South Carolina right now. Knowing all of that, you're going to get hit in the mouth as a Gamecock football team. Will they return the first punch and then the second one and keep going at it? Or will they look more like the team that I think we've seen through 5 games, not being physical enough to compete in high-level SEC games? Here's what Shane had to say about Kentucky being physical.
They are really, really physical, and
screwed that up. Let me push the button correctly.
They are really, really physical, and I mean, they've always been that way. I mean, I can remember when I was at Georgia as an assistant, and Kirby used to talk about just how physical they were. And back then, this was before they had some of the new offensive coordinators, and they were doing a lot of wildcat, and it was physical downhill and trying to bloody your nose. And Kirby used to talk about that when I worked at Georgia. So that's their mentality. He's a defensive coach, and it shows. So I feel like I hope, we match up well. I like to think that we're pretty physical too. I think we've gotten better at that here the last couple of weeks. We practice physical because we're going to need to play physical on game days, but especially Saturday night. And our players certainly understand that. I mean, we've got to play physical on Saturday. There's no question about it.
That's it. That's the game, in my opinion. Yes, other things need to happen for Carolina to win, but that's the baseline for being able to be in the game at all. And I think it's a fair concern for Carolina fans to have going in. You're not sure. Yeah, John, that hadn't happened, right? He says, let's go throw the first punch. That needs to happen. That would break a trend to get back to that conversation. And that is certainly a trend that needs to change. But we haven't seen it. And yes, John, great day. Always is. Great to hear from you. Craig continues saying, I guess I see that this isn't the traditional Kentucky team we usually have seen. The offensive line is struggling. Quarterback's injured. This is as good a chance as we've had in years. That's a good point, too. And maybe I'm overinflating Kentucky just a little bit, but I think that program is just different in 2022 than what Gamecock fans have grown accustomed to. 7 out of 8 is certainly evidence of that. Kentucky in this series recently. And what I was trying to get to, what Shane was talking about, not just that physical, although when you hear your head coach say, I hope we're physical, I hope that's, to me, that's where I go, oh, no, that's not a good sign. Maybe I think he knows that his team hasn't shown that. Josh says, I'm glad to hear Beamer saying that. Hopefully he challenges the team to be more physical. We definitely weren't more physical on the road against Arkansas. Well, that was going to be a given. Alabama was more physical maybe than Arkansas, what we just saw. But yeah, Arkansas is way up there in style. Yeah, Kentucky might not be that as much anymore with what Shane was talking about what they used to be with the Wildcat and the whole thing. And they seem to have more talented guys on the outside. And if Levis is playing, he can certainly throw it. But the Carolina inability to stop the run this year is a massive concern going into this game. Has to be, especially with the Levis injury reports. So that has to change, and then the Gamecocks' ability to run the football against a good football team, that has to improve as well. But what I was getting to earlier is where the program is from a mentality standpoint. What I've seen, that consistency of getting down on the road and then maybe clawing your way back in some of those games. In the most recent example, right, at Arkansas, you got to give Carolina some credit for that. Clearly, there is a level of, what's the word? Grit might be the word I'm looking for. It's not like, and Shane mentioned this after that game, he thought it was kind of a step forward, I think, to get right back in that Arkansas game. Whereas a lot of teams get down 21-3 and never really get back in the game. But you can't just be that. You got to be in a game from the beginning. How about get some control over a game every now and again on the road? That's what good teams do. John says, I think Jordan Burch and Zach Pickens have monster games. They need to. Spencer Rattler put it very clearly. Best players need to play well. Jordan Burch and Zach Pickens, certainly your best players up front. The reason Carolina won their last game against a ranked opponent on the road back in 2019 against number 3 Georgia is Javon Kinlaw played like a monster. I don't even know if Jordan Burch or Zach Pickens has that ability. Like, they're good players. They are 5-star guys. Javon Kinlaw was a bit of an athletic freak. Maybe Zach Pickens has, I think that would be the best comp, right? Has the ability to take over on the inside like that. We haven't seen him do it. If he can have anything close to, if he can have a game close to what Javon Kinlaw did at Georgia 3 years ago, then Carolina's got a chance. That's almost necessary, I think. Not for him specifically, but for someone to have a game like that, right? We saw J.C. Horn take over the Auburn game at Williams-Brice a few years ago. Someone from Carolina has to do that, and then they have to have other guys playing at really, really high levels around them too. Craig says, that's why I'd like to see Tonka opposite of Burch Saturday to help stop the run. Yeah, I think you're going to see some different things from the Carolina defense, knowing they have to do different things to get contain that Kentucky run game. which hasn't been good, by the way, and wasn't necessarily real good against Ole Miss, but it was good enough against Ole Miss for them to be in position to win the game, which makes me know Carolina still has to do some different stuff to get a handle on it. You can't just keep doing what they've done and just assume your linebackers are going to make plays or assume your defensive ends are going to be able to keep contained. That hasn't happened. Arkansas exposed that. Georgia took advantage of that this year. But where I'm trying to get with the program right now is that I have not seen a real mature approach, a real mature team. And it makes sense. Shane Beamer and company, this is their 18th game, right? Or their 19th game. 5 this year, 13 last year. This is their 19th game. They only played 18 games. And a mature team doesn't consistently go on the road and dig themselves a hole. They just don't. Right? They're able to figure out how to make plays early on, how to score touchdowns in the first quarter. But you do have to give a team credit and points for maturity for being able to bounce back from some of those holes. But ultimately, I would be concerned about a loss negatively impacting this Carolina team headed into a bye week. Now, we saw it last year where it actually didn't have a negative effect at all. Didn't play well against Texas A&M, had the bye week, and then came back after that. Pretty good. So maybe I'm overhyping that. Maybe it comes at a place in the season where that really should not be a concern. But I do know that it would be a massive boost to the Carolina fan base if the Gamecocks can win this game, no doubt. And I think the fan base has it at a place, at a very high place, where it doesn't quite make sense to the football team and the 2022 season. Maybe that's all I'm getting to here. What I've gathered this week. And that's understandable that fans just see games differently than coaches and players, and maybe it doesn't need to equate and be on the same footing, on the same level. Who needs to have the biggest game for Carolina tomorrow on offense? Outside of Spencer Rattler, definitely needs to protect the football a little bit better than he has, right? The touchdown to interception ratio, I think we would all agree, if it continues to be where it has been in games like this, where you get maybe one touchdown, but you get a couple of picks, that ain't going to work. That definitely has to change. Outside of Spencer Rattler, who you got? Craig says Marshawn Lloyd. Chris says all of them. See, I think you need a Gamecock receiver to really step up, a wide receiver. Because to me, that would help loosen things up for Marshawn Lloyd. It would seemingly help loosen things up for an Austin Stogner or Jaheim Bell. I think you got to get Josh Vann, Juice Wells, Corey Rucker, somebody on the outside, Jalen Brooks, one of those guys, maybe Xavier Legette, if he gets back in the game, if he's earned any more playing time after those brutal interceptions last week. Those guys have to be threats, have to produce against Kentucky, in my mind, for the Gamecock offense to have any sort of success sustaining drives like you're talking about there, Craig. Being able to keep the Kentucky defense honest enough to where you can move the sticks with the run. It doesn't matter to me who it is. It's got to be one or two at least guys being consistent, having a handful of catches. I think, let's put it this way. If more than one Gamecock wide receiver has a handful of catches or more, I think the Gamecock offense will have a pretty good day. will be in the football, will be at a place where they're in the football game. Obviously, you can't let Kentucky run up and down and score 40-plus points. I don't think anybody thinks that would be a good sign for the Gamecock football team in this game. But they don't seem to be that kind of offense either. I don't think they scored 40 all year. Definitely, Chris. That's probably, I mean, it's not nearly as fun to talk about, well, Javon Gwynn at right guard has to play well, right? Or Dylan Wanham back in the offensive line at tackle has to make sure to keep the pressure off the edge or get a consistent push. It's just not as fun to talk about. But yeah, that definitely needs to happen. You're right. He says if they have a good game, then the rest of the offense will have a good game as well. If you give Spencer Rattler some time and he throws picks, that ain't going to be a good game. But if they run block really well and that can open things up for the offense, completely agreed. Completely agreed. All right, let's get into the picks portion of the show, shall we? Unless you guys have anything else you want to bring up about the Carolina-Kentucky game, because I feel like we have talked about this thing even more so than usual, really beginning the conversation on Monday instead of still recapping, digesting what we saw over the weekend, since we didn't have a weekend game this week for Carolina, since it was a Thursday night game. RL says, for me, I don't care how we win this game as long as we win. That's been a tall order in recent years, though. Beating Kentucky, not just being in a game, would be a great step forward. No doubt, RL. Tremendous win that the fan base, I think, would appreciate more than the football team in a lot of ways. It would represent what beating Florida did last year for Shane Beamer in year one. I think it would, I forget which one of you guys said it. Does it be about the same thing? I think it would. I think you're right. But a lot like the Florida game last year wasn't the most important game going in. I don't think this is either for Carolina. That's where I think I might just disagree with how some of you guys are seeing this thing. Don't take it personally. Jason says, interesting to hear Marcus Lattimore say yesterday how much hype on an opposing running back motivated him. He expects Marshawn to have a big game because of this. He's paraphrasing. That is interesting. But you never know what motivates guys, right? You never can tell. At least being around big-time sports for as long as I have, it is really fascinating to hear it afterwards, right? Not to hear the dumb cliches and, we respect our opponents and every game's the next game's the biggest game. And yeah, we're motivated because it's all in-house and it's all on us and we want to be our best. And that's how we see every single game and the whole thing. And then finally, years later, like Marcus Lattimore is removed, you get the real stories, right? Yeah. That's what we had to say. But, man, when I was going up against a guy at my position who was getting a lot of hype, that really ticked me off, or that really motivated me more. I'm guessing that's kind of what Lattimore was saying. I wanted to make sure that I was the guy being talked about after that game, not him. I mean, there is a lot of that. I would imagine Cam Smith has a lot of that in him right now defensively for Carolina, because he hadn't been talked about so kindly in the Gamecock football conversation over the last two games, with as many pass interference penalties as he's had against Charlotte and South Carolina State. He was being talked about very kindly or very highly going into the season. Some thinking he's the best defensive back in the country. I think he would love to get back into that conversation, being talked about really, really well, and should have some opportunities, assuming Will Levis is the guy, especially. But the way that Kentucky, the Kentucky receiving corps is now being talked about, the way they have earned a lot of praise, I'm sure there's a lot of motivation in the Gamecock secondary right now. Lloyd has to be tired of hearing how good Rodriguez is. Yep, no doubt. But again, his offensive line doesn't do much for him. Good luck. The Kentucky reputation defensively is also really, really good. And they're going to have plenty to say about how much the Gamecock run game, how much success it has. Also, how Carolina can throw the ball, right? How they can call some plays. All right, let's do it. 5 games against the spread is what we've been doing the last 3 weeks now as a show. Doing a pick segment unlike any that I've ever seen before. That's how I like to do it on this show. Let's try to be a little original. We're picking games as a show. Trying to come, Roger finally pointed it out very clearly to me. Yeah, it's called a consensus. He didn't do it, but I feel like it might have been like, yeah, it's very simple. We're just trying to come to a consensus and we make a pick as a group here. So 5 games against the spread in college football. Craig giving the plug to the Believe podcast with Marcus Lattimore. And guy we've had on the show here as well in Mike Yuva from Gamecock Central. So let's do it. What are we thinking? Where are you guys at? Let's start with what you feel best about. Let me make sure I'm going to write these things down. I'm going to jot down a note here. Let me get it open to where I can type and make sure that I don't screw it up. Make sure I get our picks right. And we'll put them out on social media as well. And if you're one of those people who would like it for reference, let's say. So what are you thinking? Where are you feeling most confident in college football? Or we can go anywhere here. There are no restrictions. It's unrestricted free agent, the name of the show. What we've done in the past, though, is mostly stayed within the SEC, ACC footprint. I think we've gone Pac-12 unsuccessfully. We've gone Big 12, moderate success. That Oklahoma-Nebraska pick in week number 1, maybe the easiest money of all time on the show. Baylor last week hurt us. The week before helped us. So there is some recent history going around the country. Mostly SEC. I think we've been pretty spot on. That A&M Mississippi State game hurt us last week. Wake Forest has been good to us 2 weeks in a row, right? Wake Forest covering against Clemson, and then Wake Forest covering and then beating outright Florida State last week. Something to keep in mind as you're looking across the slate of games. Again, noon, Tennessee, LSU. A lot of people feeling Tennessee in this one, right? The way they score points. It's hard not to. It's hard for me not to. And yet, there's a piece of me that thinks this is a bit of an exposure game for Tennessee. I do find it hard to believe that Josh Heupel just somehow has figured out the keys to college football and can keep Tennessee in the top 10 the rest of the season. But Hendon Hooker's really good. To me, the key here will be how effective can Jalen Daniels be? Can he do more than just run the football consistently? Can he get it to the LSU playmakers and turn this into what I think will be a bit of a shootout? What's the over-under for this sucker? It's got to be massive, doesn't it? Let's see. My guess is low 60s. That's a big number, right? That's a big number over-under wise. The Michigan-Indiana over-under, I'm looking at 59.5. Yeah, mid-60s, 65. Kansas TCU over-under 69. That's probably the highest one we're going to get, right? 68.5 with Oklahoma State and Texas Tech. 64.5. UCLA Utah, Michigan State, Ohio State also in the mid-60s. Ole Miss Vanderbilt 61. 65.5 for Southern Cal and Washington State. So, yeah, right in there. A lot of points expected in this thing. I don't think LSU has the offensive firepower with Jaden Daniels there that Hendon Hooker and Tennessee have proven to be. And yet, I don't know if I feel tremendously confident in Tennessee. Chris is going Tennessee. We'll see, man. I just don't know. Ugh. And my computer just went wonky on me for that odd pause. That's why I'm giving you that. I'm going to have to hit a few buttons here to make sure I can see all the comments still. Let's see if I do that. Am I going to do it? Nope. I'll try to make sure we don't completely tank the program here. I'm seeing like my eyeball right now in our window. It somehow got way too. Let's see if that's going to do it. Oh, I think I got it. I think I got the reset button. Yes. Okay, we're good to go now. Sorry for the technical issue. Live stuff, man. Live stuff. Okay, let's get back into your comments here. Okay. Got it. Here we go. Leach breaks his streak, wins back-to-back games. Let's take Mississippi State. The Tonester suggests. Jason says take Wake. Do you even know if Wake's playing? You're just saying we were riding Wake Forest's coattails. Is that what we're doing? Let me check. Jason, that sounded awfully suspicious. Wake hosting Army, 16.5-point favorites. Don't like it. Not a bit. Don't like it. And I don't like the idea of just riding one team against the spread. Miami, North Carolina is interesting. Miami, a 3.5-point favorite, 4:00 game. Duke, only a 3.5 dog at Georgia Tech. Interesting as well in the ACC. I almost like Virginia Tech to cover 14.5 at Pitt. Noon game. Louisville, a 2.5-point favorite on the road at Virginia. Also, possibilities. Just throwing those out there. NC State, my favorite pick, Troy says. I think I like that one as well. But I can see them winning that game by a field goal. 3.5 is what we've got that one with Florida State. So what I'm getting right now is, seems like there's little confidence going into this week. Little confidence is what I'm seeing. So Jason was pretty firm with take Wake. Just they played so many really, really big time games, back-to-back weeks, and now to have Army coming in, that letdown seems to be. I'm not saying Army's going to win the game, but 16.5, I can see them covering that thing pretty easy. See, Chris, I think if I went anywhere in the TCU Kansas game, I would want to take Kansas in the points. Maybe that's just an emotional way to look at that thing. All right, I'll get the pick started here. What I think my favorite pick is. Let me give you guys that, and then maybe that'll get us going. See, Troy says you like Pitt also. Virginia Tech's not good. No. I was saying I like Virginia Tech to cover 14.5. Pitt doesn't seem to play many games outside of a couple of touchdowns, just their style. Craig says, I don't think Mizzou gave so much last week. They go on the road this week. He thinks Florida covers. We got that one at 11.5. Florida favored by. Yeah, I don't think I feel confident about that. I understand the mindset though. All right, where do I feel most confident in? Yeah, that Mississippi State game, tempting. Do we want to take 29.5 points with Auburn covering that with the show that they have going on? I don't know. And what Georgia kind of has to prove. Anybody feel any kind of confidence in taking 24.5 with Texas A&M? I don't. Man, this is where we are, huh? In week 6. I think we've got enough information now to where we can feel uncomfortable about all these games. We can make a case one way or the other, where at the beginning of the season, it was a little less information sometimes is better. Jason says, hard to take Tennessee this week. Just feels like a game that's closer than it should be. Well, I mean, 3.5 to me is a game that's closer than it should be. Tennessee wins the game by just a touchdown. To me, these programs are not a touchdown apart. Tennessee is 2 touchdowns better than LSU at least right now. But on the road, I don't know. Yep, Troy says not touching Georgia and Auburn. Jason, please give us some more information, man. You think I know who James Madison is playing? I got no clue who James Madison is playing. You said take Wake against Army. Now take James Madison. Please tell me. What else you got in there, man? Troy likes Florida as well. All right, that's 2 votes for Florida. Who had the original one? Craig? That might be wise. Let's see. Let's see what Florida's coming off of. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think they had, yeah, they ended up playing on Sunday last week, right? So that's not a great sign, right? Especially if we're talking about the advantage that Carolina has, 2 more days to prepare. But it was a non-conference game last week. Did Missouri get beat up in that thing? I don't remember that necessarily happening. 11 is a lot of points. I think Missouri has played well at the Swamp in years past. Just getting to my first game is a difficult one. I think I might feel the most confident right now in Kentucky covering 6.5. Jason says, I got confidence in South Carolina plus 6.5. I said it there. I mean, what can you possibly know about Arkansas State, Jason, to feel good about James Madison over Arkansas? What's the spread? I got no clue. I got no problem with anybody looking at a game like that, but I'm going to have to hear some information to buy it, Jason. I need to hear something. Other than James Madison's a pretty good program. Arkansas State's been a pretty decent program. It's basically Juice Wells versus Corey Rucker there from the Gamecock standpoint. James Madison, Arkansas State. Can't do it. All right, this is definitely the biggest struggle in the conversation that we've had. But just to get to one game, just to get to one pick I feel really confident about. I'm telling you guys, if I had to make one pick right now that I felt confident in, it would be Kentucky covering 6.5 right now against Carolina. If it was 10.5, maybe not, right? The original. But I just translate what I saw from the weird Mark Stoops press appearance last night, saying, I don't have anything I got nothing for you guys. I only tell you guys if we got guys out, we don't have guys out. Well, to me, that means Will Levis should be playing, right? To some degree. And if he's playing at some degree, I think he's good enough to cause Carolina problems. Let's put it that way. So let me put it this way. Ooh, okay, Coastal just a 13.5 point favorite on the road against Louisiana Monroe, but Coastal hasn't been nearly as impressive this year as they have in years past. How's Grayson McCall? Is he good? Is he 100%? Talk to me. Troy, James Madison, undefeated, covered every week. What's the spread? You guys are giving me, I need some more information. You guys are going to offer these things. Come on now. So Roger's with me on Kentucky. Yeah, York, I hear hoping he's right for turnovers, but in your head, aren't you guys thinking Kentucky minus 6.5? Pretty safe bet. If you're just going investment, you're just going with your head. That's where I'm at. $17.5 is what you got to give for James Madison. Is that what you're saying, Troy? 17.5? That's a ton of points, man. So I'm writing it down right now. Kentucky minus 6.5. That is the game that I feel most confident in. Chris, you're in there. Okay. I think we're endorsing that. It sounds like I don't have major complaints anyway. And that's one of those picks. If it goes otherwise, then fine. Okay. What's next? You guys want to go Florida minus 11.5 against Mizzou after they just almost beat Georgia? That's a tough one. I'm not feeling great there. I would feel more confidence in just giving LSU 3.5 with Tennessee than I would in 11. TCU over Kansas, I don't mind. NC State, I don't mind that one either. Let's go with Troy and NC State. We're going minus 3.5 in that one. Is that right? Yep. I think this is going to be an entertaining game. I think Florida State is much improved. I think they've shown us that. I love Jordan Travis back there. I'm not convinced that NC State is one of the best 15 teams in the country. I'm not, but they played with Clemson. It was a game. They didn't completely lay an egg in that one. They showed me enough in that game for me to think at home this week, they bounce back and keep kind of control of their season. I'd much prefer Florida State to win the game, actually. So this is another one where I'd prefer Carolina to win for sure. I'd prefer Florida State to win, so I'll pick the opposite. That way I can kind of feel good one way or the other. You might see it as, well, you're not going to be happy completely one way or another. There's that too. So NC State minus 3.5. You guys got big objections to that one, let me know. All right. Again, the James Madison 17.5. What are we doing there? I'm not buying that one. Okay, everybody's liking Florida. Multiple times. I got to go with you guys. Okay. I'm on the record not feeling overly comfortable with that. But Florida minus 11.5 against Mizzou is our third pick. We've got Kentucky minus 6.5, NC State minus 3.5, Florida minus 11.5. 3 favorites, all at home. I got no problem with that. Now you're saying that seems to make more sense. 10.5, the James Madison. But the point is that I'm not going to be caring about that game. We're not going that one. This is a good question. Texas Tech getting 9.5 from Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, big time win last week. Can they have 2 good performances? What the heck is Texas Tech? I don't know. Agreed, Roger. Difficult week. Jason, take James Madison. You'll thank us on Monday. Okay, NC State is the pick. You guys like that? All right, good. Good to hear. All right, here I will do this just because Jason is being so adamant. The fact that they are undefeated against the spread, love it. James Madison is the pick, minus 10.5. So weird. I don't know where they're playing. I got nothing. Or do we take one dog or are we going 5 favorites? Because I wouldn't have a problem going Tennessee as the last pick. Wouldn't have a problem with that at all, given 3.5. Do we go a larger spread? Do we give 17.5 for Ole Miss and Vandy? Do we think Ole Miss is mature enough to go and be who they've been? Kansas is also covered every week. Wake, Jason, you're going to yell a couple of times now. I took your James Madison. Now you're saying Wake to cover against Army? What, riding Wake's coattails? Yeah, I kind of like that one as well. The odds of Georgia Tech having 2 good games in a row, but I don't know how much confidence I got in Duke. Ole Miss, you like that one, DC? I mean, betting against Vandy usually is a pretty good bet, isn't it? You know Lane Kiffin loves to score points. He didn't get to score many last week. This is my mindset here. Okay, so I think we got to narrow down to 3 options. Kansas covering at home, getting points against TCU. Wake minus 16.5 at home against Army. Or Ole Miss minus 17.5 at Vandy. Those are our three options. You guys vote in on that. See what we got. What do you think? Chris, you like Ole Miss? I think that would be my preference right now. Yep, DC, you're saying that's the safe bet. Craig, Troy, Jason, what do you guys think? Jason, I hear you. You're screaming Wake. I think I'm going to cut my losses with them, or no. I'm going to not get greedy with Wake and say, nah, I'm good. We won a couple of weeks. Troy's votes for Kansas. I can't do it. Craig says Ole Miss. McCall is back. Coastal, Roger saying, okay, take Ole Miss. Thank you, Jason. Jason concedes there. That'll be our last pick. We're going all favorites this week. Ole Miss minus 17.5 on the road at Vandy is pick number 5. James Madison minus 10.5 against Arkansas State is Jason's weird pick that I'm trusting you on, Jason. Okay. And don't tell me, no, I said Wake. Wake was going to be. You endorsed James Madison. You brought it up all on your own. That's yours. You get all the credit for that pick and all the blame if it doesn't work out. Florida minus 11.5 at home against Mizzou. NC State minus 3.5 at home against Florida State. Kentucky minus 3.5 against the Gamecocks. Those are our 5 picks. Well done, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys and your help. Troy's liking Ole Miss as well. Nice work. And this is the right time to tell you that I appreciate what you guys have done on this show for the last, what has it been, 4 months? Started May, June, July, August, September. Whoa, 5 months we've done this thing. Today is going to be the last time we do this like it has been done daily. Gonna press pause on that for sure, and it might be a full stop. Gonna start a new full-time gig outside of what I've done in the past, talking just sports. Gonna grow up and get a big boy job here soon. So I didn't want to make this a big thing going into the show and the last show and the whole thing. I don't know what this is going to become. I never knew what it was going to be starting it. So I think trying to tell you that I think I know what will happen from here is outside of my realm of understanding right now. Been on a crazy ride for the last year. Today is October 7th, 2022. October 8th, 2021, I sat in the same spot and did my last radio show for 107.5 The Game. 1 year ago, almost to the day. And that ended not of my choosing. The way that we've been doing this is of my choosing, and I feel much differently as I sit here talking to you right now than I did 1 year ago for sure, because I have the control this time. I'm not being told, hey, you can't do this anymore. Hey, that thing you really love to do and that has been your career, you can't do it anymore. That one hurt a lot. This one does not. So I am only have any kind of mixed emotions with this right now because of my appreciation for you guys being invested in this show as much as you have and contributing, being a part of it. I've loved it, man. I really have loved doing this show in this way. I would have loved to have taken it maybe to higher heights, but that's what it turned out to be. I feel like I bet on myself and will always appreciate doing that, taking that leap. And now it's time to go to the next chapter, the next stage. And in this last year for me has been, it has been something, man. A constant journey and a test in faith, if you will. And that's why I am encouraged and optimistic. And I do ultimately feel good that this is coming to an end how it has been before. Maybe, I don't know, maybe eventually we'll do this once a week, or it'll get done just differently and it'll keep living. But the way that it's been done, 8 to 10 live every morning, weekdays, Monday through Friday, just has to end for me and my family. It's what it is. Appreciate all the thoughts and well wishes here. Craig says good luck in whatever you get into. It's been fun, man. It's been a blast with you guys. Roger, appreciate that. Wish you well. We'll miss this. Same here. Glad for you. Jason says sad for us. We've enjoyed the UFA show. Thank you. Glad for you. Deserve it, Roger says. Wait, what am I supposed to listen to now? Hate it, but we all have to make tough decisions. Good luck. And yeah, I'm not trying to be vague or overly ambiguous here. So I'm going to kind of, I think, use what I've done before in like a broadcast capacity, right? In TV and radio, and now do it for a publisher called Tan Books. They publish Catholic books mostly. I don't know if you guys know, but I'm a Catholic guy, and that kind of started all of this a year ago with the vaccine mandate and the whole thing with the radio. But so now I'm going to help them do publicity, do some marketing stuff, try to see if my broadcasting background can translate into a more traditional big boy kind of job. And I'm excited about it. I know that's what needs to be next for me, if that makes sense to you guys. This whole thing's been kind of like a trust process. I was wrong. So admitting that kind of stinks. But I thought, as I started this show, that I thought that my purpose in life was going to continue to be talking about sports and using whatever talents I may or may not have in that way. And now I'm being shown, nope, going another way. So I just got to trust it. And that's where I can feel really, really good about it. It is a little emotional for me, kind of closing a chapter in a lot of ways on daily broadcasting career that I've done for 22 years now. But I have done, man, everything that I could ever imagine doing. And it's been fantastic. And you guys are a big part of that. So in that vein, you need to get more of your comments in here, and I need to read them. And then we'll kind of put a bow on this sucker. Good luck, Tim, and whatever you do, Troy says. We'll be following you wherever you're on. And that's the thing. I was talking to my dad about this, and he's like, well, you need to make sure that people know what's going. Or it's like, well, it might be how it used to have to be, right? With if you were on just doing traditional like legacies, TV or radio, but we're all connected. It's social media. I ain't going anywhere. Twitter handle is going to be the same. I will be putting out annoying tweets, I'm sure, as often. York, hope to meet you in person one day as well, man. Last one to meet for the early game guys. Yeah, the other guys, great as well. Josh, enjoy the show. Good luck. Thank you, man. Yeah, every October, you break my heart. JK with RL. Sorry, man. Yeah, who knows, Jason? Maybe I'll start a midnight show one day. Go check out HC show 11 to 1 on YouTube. The Big Spur. Okay. Yeah. That's another place to go. JC Sherbert show is where Craig is endorsing. Roger says we walk by faith. Sounds great, Tim. Thanks, man. Bull, come drop in once a week at least, and many blessings to you. Thanks, man. Good luck from DC. Yeah, I know. Oh, and I wanted to give a lot of thank yous. I should have started with that, right? Jamie Bradford, who he's mentioned, Craig mentions here. JB and Goldwater kind of paved the path in my mind for this option in media in general. And I leaned on Jamie early on in this process. Really appreciate him. Really appreciate everybody who's given their time to be a guest on this show. Perry Orth, Michael Roth, a couple of the first guests we had on this, Corey Miller and Rick Sanford, most recently, weekly guests during football season. Everyone who's been a guest. I can't go through all the names right now, but no, if you've been on this show, I really appreciate, and you guys especially who have done it every day, I mean, being a part of this has made it worth doing for sure. You're closing the show, closing the book, but put a bookmark in it, Chris says. Exactly. DC, happy Friday to everybody. RL, the same thing. Thank you. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, guys. Sorry for the emotional ending here, or the maybe overly dramatic ending, but know that I have peace about this thing moving forward, and that is a much different place than a year ago or so ago. A much different ending for me. So, again, much appreciated. And yes, Jason, football. Great way to wrap up this edition, October 7th, 2022, unrestricted free agent.